Good evening, everyone. We continue our study in the book of Isaiah. We are now in Isaiah chapter 19. Again, I make reference to the fact that the book of Isaiah is written in a very poetic way. It is not written in any sequential way, and it is combining a lot of, um, I would say, visions and prophecies, and each prophecy is independent by itself. So yesterday we saw chapter 18, and today, with regards to chapter 19, it begins the same way as chapter 17. It says the burden against Egypt. And this word burden would be the prophecy regarding Egypt, and it's a very serious prophecy. It says, Behold, the Lord rides on a swift cloud. Remember, all of this is poetic language. It gives us a picture that God is coming rapidly, that God is coming rapidly. And so a swift cloud would be a cloud that just blows very quickly in the wind. And his destination, he says, will come into Egypt, Mizraim. And in that discussion, he says the idols of Egypt will totter at his presence. Well, I guess you could find that this word totter is actually quiver or shake, right? It will shake at his presence. Now, this idea of presence means from his face or faces. And the heart of Egypt will melt in its midst. The idea of melt here is to dissolve. And so this talks about as God comes in to Egypt, they will, well, I guess it gives you the picture that they will utterly surrender, be very fearful, and all the type of words that we can describe when God actually comes to a nation, in this case, for judgment. Now, in verse 1, it describes that it is God that seems to be doing it, but as we read forward, you find that the poetic language is ascribing to God the judgment upon Egypt, Mizraim, but the effects are done by the Assyrians. I will set Egypt against Egyptians. Everyone will fight against his brother, everyone against his neighbor, city against city, kingdom against kingdom. Now, all of these means there will be internal confusion, internal strife. Now, Egypt being a nation, there are many kingdoms. Now, understand kingdoms is a, a geographical area where a particular clan would rule as king. So if you think of it like in India, there are many provinces or many states, and each state is like a kingdom. City against city, people against people. And there will be an internal strife when this judgment actually comes upon Egypt. Now, think of this as the time where the Assyrians are there, right? The Assyrians are there. It says the spirit of Egypt will fail in its midst. I will destroy their counsel. They will consult the idols and the charmers, the mediums, and the sorcerers. Think of it this way: whenever something happens, Egypt, or the spirit of Egypt, in verse 3 says, this is the Ruach of Egypt. The nature of the Egyptians will look for counsel in their counselors, the wise men, the idols, the charmers, the mediums, the sorcerers. And you notice that God says, do not consult them. Because when they consult these intermediaries, then they are not looking at God, right? Not looking at God. And so the Israelites are told that they are not to do that, but the Egyptians do. And so they are always warned not to do that when they came out of Egypt, because that was the Egyptians' practices. Now, what we are reading now is poetic language describing the destruction of Egypt at the time of the Assyrians. And the Egyptians I will give into the hand of a cruel master. This will be Sennacherib, Assyrians. And a fierce king will rule over them, says the Lord of hosts. Now, this idea here, will rule over them, appears to be the fact that they were not taken into exile. They were left in the land. Unlike the northern kingdom of Israel, when the Assyrians came, they were taken away and replaced by Assyrians. Now, in verse 5, again, poetic language describing the area is going to be devastated. The waters will fail from the sea, the river will be wasted and dried up. These are pictures of the Mediterranean and the Nile. And for some reason, the Nile will start to dry up. The rivers will turn foul. The brooks of defense will be emptied and dried up. Reeds and rushes will wither because of no water. The papyrus reeds by the river, by the mouth of the river, and everything sown by the river will wither, driven away, and be no more. We also read in verse 8, the fishermen will also mourn. No water in the river, no fish. And so all those who lament, who cast hooks into the river, they will languish, who spread nets on the waters, the way that they catch fish. But there is no more. And so those who work in fine flax, and understand flax is made into thread, and the strong thread that are made into nets. And those who weave fine fabric will be ashamed. This idea of fine fabric in verse 9 would be nets. So nobody catching fish, nobody needs the net. It says its foundations will be broken, all who make wages will be troubled of soul. There will be economic turmoil. So a great nation like Egypt can suddenly suffer like that. It says, verse 11, surely the princes of Zoan are fools. Pharaoh's wise counselors give foolish counsel. How do you say to Pharaoh, I am the son of the wise, the son of ancient kings? And what does this mean? So, first of all, the idea of Zoan in verse 11 is likely the capital of Egypt at the time of Isaiah. And pharaohs always keep counselors, those who give advice by his side. But at this point in time, they will give foolish advice. Now, what is foolish counsel here? The counsel here literally means, well, I guess you could say, stupid counsel, right? Stupid counsel, with no logic. And definitely they have no logic because they don't know how to deal with the Assyrians. They have always been dealing with their past, and their past is a glorious past. And the Egyptians are a people in a kingdom where they never think that they can ever be conquered by anyone else. But at this point in time, they are facing the Assyrians. So, how do you say to Pharaoh, I'm the son of the wise, when you're giving stupid counsel? Because there is no experience to such advice. They are the son of ancient kings. They're supposed to give good advice. So, where are they? Where are your wise men? Let them tell you now, let them know what the Lord of hosts has purposed against Egypt. This idea of purposed against Egypt is to have in plan. And this is usually referred to in judgment. And God has set this in motion. This is not an advice to Egypt, but this is an information communicated to Egypt. The princes of Zoan have become fools. They have no idea how to deal with this. The princes of North are deceived. Now, North apparently is Memphis, also once a capital of Egypt, and they all have wise men. They have also deluded Egypt. Now, the idea of deluded, I guess you can say they have done wrong. They have caused to err, right? Deluded here means to cause to err, to make mistakes. And it says those who are the mainstay of its tribes. These princes are the key, and yet they've been giving bad and foolish advice. And Egypt doesn't know how to handle the attacks of the Assyrians. Verse 14, the Lord has mingled what we call it, a perverse spirit in her midst. This idea of a perverse spirit, I guess you can say uh, in verse 14, something that is distorted, I guess distortion or insanity. I guess that's a good way of looking at it. Distortion or insanity means that they are going crazy. And I think you can appreciate what's happening, that in this prophecy against Egypt, Egypt will never be able to tell that this can ever happen, because they are a proud nation of long-standing, glorious past. No nation was able to conquer them. And so at this point in time, God put this wind among them, driving them crazy, that they have caused Egypt to err in all her work. The decisions that they want to do, it's all wrong. They are like a drunken man staggers back into his own vomit, meaning the drunken man has vomited, and then he walks without knowing how to walk straight and falls into his vomit. Now, this is how this verse actually means. Neither will there be any work for Egypt. So any work for Egypt is not about working, but about things that they can actually do to save themselves. And those advice given by the counselors is called the head or tail. The head means very wise. The tail means least wise, but still giving advice. Then the next part here, you can see that it says here, the palm branch or bulrush. The palm branch is a the branches of the top of a tree. And so you would find that this would be up there, and it also means the same idea, very wise. The bulrush is like the papyrus, little stems that grows out of the river. This would be the least wise. And it says, in that day, Egypt will be like women. Now, this is not supposed to be a derogatory word, but it is to let us know that when Egypt is said to be like women, they are unable to defend herself. And she will be afraid and fearful. Now, both of these words are slightly different words. The first word is they will tremble, afraid by shaking, right? That's the idea, afraid by shaking. The second idea is to be in awe, in shock. Both are afraid. And they are both afraid, really, mainly because of the waving of the hand of the Lord of hosts. Now, what do you mean, waving of the hand of the Lord of hosts? Now, this idea of waving, it is used as a swinging, the wave offering, the hands lifted up. So it's a lifting of the hand of the Lord of hosts over Egypt, which he waves over it. And this means that God is passing judgment. And every now and then I will remind all of us that these words are poetic language, painting a picture in our heads. The land of Judah will be a terror to Egypt. Now, 17, a terror, is, I guess you can say, a dread. The idea here would be, it will be, I guess you can say, he's moving about, unable to stand, unable to stand straight. It's like a person having vertigo. And this is the description of the fact that Egypt is afraid of Judah. Now, based on this, I want us to begin to think, why would Egypt be afraid of Judah? Then we will look at it as we go down. Everyone who makes mention of it will be afraid in himself because of the counsel of the Lord of hosts, which he has determined against it. Now, this counsel of God is the plan, right? The plan, the purpose of God. And this purpose here refers to judgment. As God has laid judgment upon Egypt, they should be afraid. And every nation will be afraid. Every Egyptian will be afraid. And so this is about Judah. What did God do with Judah that made them afraid of Judah, and in so doing, afraid of God? God has determined upon it. And that means God has planned against it. And so think of the time when Sennacherib came about laying siege upon Jerusalem, where Hezekiah and Isaiah were both in the city. And God literally overnight sent an angel to destroy them. And that episode has been permeated to all the lands. And when Egypt hears of it, they will be terrified of what God did in Judah. Now, terrified in the sense that they will be so shocked that the God of Judah has defended them, and there's nothing that can come to defend Egypt. Everyone is giving bad advice. All the idols, the mediums, and all those people who says that they can give advice, they are all wrong advice. The Syrians came and crushed them, destroyed them, rule over them. But when they hear of what God did for Judah, destroying the armies of Sennacherib, now they realize the God of Judah is the awesome God. Now, that is how verse 17 comes about. Verse 18. Now, after they have seen the destruction of Sennacherib, and Sennacherib ran home, in that day, after God has shown his power in the land of Judah, it says 5 cities in the land of Egypt will speak the language of Canaan, will speak the language of what the Israelites speak. Now, this is very interesting because this would be Egypt themselves that will honor and wants to understand the language of Judah. And then they come to know God, the Lord of hosts. They would make oaths by the Lord of hosts. One will be called the city of destruction. Actually, this is the city of the sun. And it is probably Beit Shemesh. In that day, there will be an altar to the Lord in the midst of the land of Egypt. Well, we are told that by prophecy, that when God destroys the army of Sennacherib, the Assyrians, the Egyptians will turn to God. They will make a pillar to the Lord at its border with Israel. Now, this particular pillar is mentioned actually in Jeremiah chapter 43, verse 13. Now, why is this important for now? Is that at this point in time, when Isaiah was writing, the event hasn't happened yet. And when they saw what God did to Sennacherib and the Assyrian army, they were shocked. They are so afraid of the God of Judah. And so they turned to the God of Judah and built an altar, built a pillar. Now, then later on in Jeremiah chapter 43, we read that the Egyptians then happened to have turned back to idolatry and started to worship this pillar. And Jeremiah had instructed that that would be destroyed. Verse 20, and it will be for a sign and for a witness to the Lord of hosts in the land of Egypt that they actually have turned to Jehovah Tzevaot. For they will cry to the Lord because of the oppressors, the Assyrians, and he will send them a savior and a mighty one, and he will deliver them. Now, this would be Hezekiah. In verse 20, Hezekiah is the person that will be sent to rescue them. Then the Lord will be known to Egypt, and the Egyptians will know the Lord in that day, and will make sacrifice and offering. Yes, they will make a vow to the Lord and perform it. and the Lord will strike Egypt. He will strike and he will heal it, and they will return to the Lord, and he will be entreated by them and heal them. So all of this seems to tell us that God judged and God restored, but only for the time when they have seen, or the generation that had seen the acts of God. Verse 23, in that day after Sennacherib has gone back and Egypt was released and rescued, there will be a highway from Egypt to Assyria. That is the highway that is for trade. That is also the highway where the armies from the north will come to the south. And the Assyrian will come into Egypt, and the Egyptian to Assyria. And the Egyptians will serve with the Assyrians. They will be friends eventually. In that day, Israel will be one of three with Egypt and Assyria, a blessing in the midst of the land. Now, what does that mean? Just to let you know that in that day, Israel, as God has rescued Judah from the siege of the Sennacherib, after all that was done, Israel will become an equal, respected again, right? Respected again. They were bullied, but now they were respected again as a mighty nation like Egypt, like Assyria, because the power of Judah was in the hands of God, whom the Lord of hosts shall bless. Israel is whom God will bless. He says, bless my people. So let me just change this. Bless my people who were in Egypt. And then bless the work of my hands. And then this is regarding Assyria. It is not God blessing Egypt, it's not God blessing Assyria. And God bless Israel, my heritage. So basically, the whole aspect is about Israel. God is blessing Israel, and it is to let Egypt and Assyria know that Israel is the nation of God, my people, my inheritance. And with this, we come to the end of chapter 19.